So why don't we start with you just kind of introducing yourself, telling us who you are and what you do and that kind of thing.
Sure. So my name is Kim Roche, and my business is Kim the Dog Trainer. I'm a certified dog behavior consultant and a certified separation anxiety trainer. So I work with a lot of behavior issues, especially separation anxiety.
Awesome. Perfect. Okay. So tell us how you're in Austin, right?
Mm-hmm.
Based in Austin. And so how did you get involved in dog training just as a general field?
Oh, completely by accident. Back in 1999 or 2000, I thought that I was a great pet dog owner. And then I adopted a problem dog. And Calvin, the dog I adopted, started attacking my first dog. And at that time, there were only 1 or 2 positive dog trainers, positive reinforcement dog trainers in Austin.
Wow.
So I worked with one of them, Lee Mannix. And by the time I got my 2 guys to the point where we could live peaceably together, he hired me first as an apprentice, then as a trainer, and then as head trainer of the Lee Mannix Center for Canine Behavior. And in 2004, I went out on my own, and I've been Kim the Dog Trainer ever since.
Wow. So you kind of got thrown into the deep end a little bit in terms of, like, this was not, oh, I have adopted my dog and I need to teach some basic obedience and let's do the easy thing. No,
right.
You kind of got thrown into the deep end.
Yeah, I really did.
So I'm curious, this wasn't on our list, but I'm just curious. You said there were only 2 positive reinforcement trainers in the area at the time. So what made you decide those were the people that was the philosophy you were going to go after?
Well, at the time when I found Lee, I had actually been planning to go to vet school. So I was working at a board and train kennel at that time, and I saw the trainers there use really aversive methods. And one of the things I especially didn't like was how, they would put the prong collars or the e-collars on and the dogs would be perfect. And then they would take the collars off and it was like the dogs didn't know anything. And I actually reached out to the trainer that I was working for at the time. And, I listened to his advice and I was like, quite honestly, I would rather just have 2 separate households for the rest of these dogs' lives. I would rather keep the problem than fix it the way he said. It just wasn't worth it.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing that little tidbit.
Yeah.
So you struck off on your own. I think you said 2004.
Mm-hmm.
And at what point did you decide to pursue kind of a specialty in separation anxiety?
Well, I've always been interested in separation anxiety. One of the probably the strangest things professionally that has ever happened to me was when I adopted my first dog. He had a little bit of separation anxiety. So he was fine for several years, and then it started to creep back up. And I started following best practices at the time. And, some of it is just, don't say hi to your dog or really give them a whole lot of attention when you leave. And don't give them a whole lot of attention when you come back. And I unwittingly put all of that sort of greeting energy onto my cat. And then I went on vacation and he got a urinary tract infection. And I wound up having to go through a fairly involved separation anxiety protocol with my kitty.
Interesting.
Yeah, because I don't know if it really had anything to do with how I was behaving with him, but he did develop separation anxiety. And I was at that point well enough into my career that I was able to research a little more, what to do. And that's how I found out about Milena DiMartini Price and her protocols. And last year, I decided to study with her and become a CSAT.
And I think that's awesome because, quite frankly, if I get people coming to me with separation anxiety, I'm like, no.
I used to be like that too.
I'm happy to say, go see Kim, because I think it's great that, and this is kind of the debate that, do owners really care about certifications, and do they, are they just more interested in results and all that and stuff? Well, I don't know, maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But for me to look at your website and say, oh, she's certified in this by somebody I trust and respect, that I know knows what you're talking about. Okay, I feel great about that, Yeah. So it's very interesting. It's then that your pursuit of that was really triggered by a cat more so than a dog. That is interesting. So, what percentage of your casework would you say in your company is separation anxiety stuff? That's kind of what we wanted to focus on a little bit today.
Sure. I would say about 20%. So about 1 out of 5 of my cases.
Awesome. And what does that, if someone's like, okay, I'm going to work with Kim for separation anxiety stuff to help my dog, what does that process look like? What does working a typical case look like, kind of on your end or on the client's, the family's end?
So it's a lot different than the way I see most of my other clients, in that it starts out with a phone call because I want to ask a lot of details, and I don't love, making people fill out like a 6-page intake form right off the bat. So I ask some questions, and then the separation anxiety protocol that I follow is a little bit different than most of my clients are expecting. So I really like to fill them in on details and let them know what's going to happen. So first a phone call, then we'll do a Zoom meeting, not dissimilar to what we're doing here, where I get the layout of their house, because that's a really important thing. I meet them and their dog, and we just do a little bit of a trial run. So we do an evaluation to see, how long the dog can stay comfortably in their homes before they become upset. And sometimes that can be, a few minutes. Sometimes dogs become, moderately upset just as they're walking to the door. And from there, I develop a training plan, and we go week to week, where the client will do about 30 minutes of training once a day for 5 days. So it's always 5 days on, 2 days off.
I like that.
And it's never the same 2 days, because dogs are smart and they definitely understand patterns. So we want to kind of keep them guessing.
Cool. And are most of your clientele local, or because you've got the Zoom capability, you're able to work with people who, aren't necessarily within driving distance or something like that?
Well, a lot of CSATs see people from all over the world. My separation anxiety client base is mostly referrals from vets or other trainers, or people who find me through word of mouth. So it's been mostly local.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things, like I had told you, I think, when I had been thinking about this series and what I wanted to do and who I wanted to talk to,
Yeah.
I thought, Kim, she's the only certified separation anxiety person here locally. She'd be a great one to talk to. And then we had coronavirus. And I think there's some, I don't want to say concern necessarily, but some anticipation within the training community, wondering how many dogs coming out of this quarantine are going to wind up having some problems and having some issues. So that kind of feeds into the next question I had, which is separation anxiety a learned behavior, or is it more of a genetic thing that they're born with, or is it a combination of both of those things?
Well, I really believe that it is a combination of nature and nurture. We know that certain dog breeds, such as beagles, have a higher predisposition towards separation anxiety. But we also know that certain life experiences can also contribute. So it's more common in dogs who have been rescued than dogs who are adopted from a family friend or a breeder. But that doesn't mean that all rescue dogs have separation anxiety, and it certainly doesn't mean that all purebred dogs are immune to it, but it's definitely a combination.
And I would hope in some ways that would give owners a little bit of comfort, because I know sometimes I feel like at least in other areas, sometimes I feel like people are like, well, what did I do wrong to make my dog this way, And sometimes with fear or something like that, you didn't do anything wrong. I mean, there's some things maybe that you could have done better, but your dog came like this out of the womb. Like there was a genetic predisposition for this, and you could have put this dog living with a trainer, being raised by the best, and you can still have problems. So I hope sometimes that genetic component and being able to tell people like it's usually both, it's not usually one or the other, would hopefully comfort them and ease their worry a little bit that, you know what, you can do the best you can, and sometimes we still have these problems, and we're going to work on it now, but just it's okay if you like I said, this dog could have lived with a trainer and still had some of these problems. So hopefully that gives your clients a little bit of relief, maybe.
Yeah, and I love that message. Sometimes when I first start working with clients with any behavior problem, but it feels like especially separation anxiety, they feel a lot of guilt, and they may actually have been blamed by their vets or another trainer or family members saying, you did this or you did that, or you didn't do this or you didn't do that, and it's your fault, when it really often isn't.
Right. And something I actually just was saying the other day was like, I can't necessarily get upset with people for not doing something they don't know. So like we can't get, what happened in the past happened in the past, and that might inform what's going on right now. But we're gonna move on from here, and we're gonna work to do better now. Now that I can teach you and give you instruction and help you. But we can't do anything about what happened in the past. We can do things starting now about what's happening now. And kind of that concept of like, if you do have a rescue dog, we don't know what happened back then. We might think something happened, but we don't know. But you can make a new history for your dog starting now. So that's hopefully what people are able to embrace and are excited about doing, and can just kind of move on from day one. So kind of on that, since you're kind of the expert here, most definitely the expert in this area, what are your thoughts about, do we need to be mindful and watchful for kind of a spike in separation anxiety when things get back to normal? Or do you feel like people just don't need to be giving it any thought, just live how they are going to live now, and then go back to how they used to live when we ride this wave out?
Yeah, and oh my gosh, I I really do worry. So one of the things that trainers and behavior consultants who focus on separation anxiety see is, in September, when the kids go back to school and mom goes back to work full time, or when somebody's schedule changes or there's a divorce or a separation, then that's sometimes when separation anxiety really becomes a noticeable problem. And I'm really worried about all of these dogs who all of a sudden are with their people 24/7. And I definitely have recommendations for anybody who's interested, because I would really rather you not see me if you don't have to.
Yeah, do some preventative things. Yeah. So that's interesting that you guys, since you work this field just normally, you're already seeing, when we have these pattern changes or routine changes or schedule changes that are predictable in like school, going back to school, like you said, or if there's a divorce or separation, like you already see that. And now we're having this on a huge national scale of everybody is forced to be home all day, every day. And then there's going to be like this kind of shock to the dog that, oh, wait, now I'm not having that anymore.
So I really believe that right now is the best possible time. If you have a separation anxiety dog, it's the best possible time to start training, because you have an opportunity to do it in a very gradual way, and a very easy way that you may never have again. And even if you don't have any separation issues, or at least you didn't coming into this time of quarantine, there are things that you can do to make sure that problems don't crop up.
Right. Because if I've lost my train of thought, but if like we were saying, if you can be proactive about, let's just make sure that we don't have any problems coming out of this, and yes, let's do that, and not have to, because my understanding of the separation anxiety work is a lot of it is, and you can correct me, please give me feedback, but a lot of it involves not pushing the dog over threshold. And so the great elephant in the room with separation anxiety work is, how are we going to not leave this dog alone?
Yeah, usually that takes some planning, right? But now, it's pretty easy.
It is. That's a great perspective. Like, if you've got problems with separation anxiety, your dog, like, start working on it now, because there's not going to be that crazy expense of getting people to come and sit with your dog while you go to work or something like that. So do you find, just out of my own personal curiosity, do you find that, like, how do you approach that with clients? Like, how do you have that conversation where, because that's what freaks me out about separation anxiety work. The biggest thing is like telling people basically your dog can't be left alone. So how do a lot of clients freak out about that? How do you walk them through that and help them mentally get on board with that?
So that's a big question. And I think it's one that surprises me always, because I was really worried when I started doing this protocol. I was really worried that people would just say, you're insane. I can't just never leave my dog alone. But most of the clients that I see, they've already been partially doing that. So, sometimes I see people who haven't left their dog alone in 3 years. And that's such a difference from what I was expecting. So it is not always something that is super easy, But with creativity, a lot of the time we can work through it.
That's
And there's so
encouraging.
many resources.
Yeah, it's kind of that's common issue where the worry about the thing is actually worse than, like you said, you went into it thinking, oh my goodness, how am I going to tell these people that they're going to feel housebound?
Right.
When most of the time, and maybe it kind of validates the client as well, because like you said, there's a lot of guilt. And I can imagine guilt in terms of, every time I leave, my dog freaks out, and so therefore I don't want to leave. And so then to have a trainer come in and say, we're going to make sure your dog doesn't have to go through that during the training process, that might actually really help the client to have kind of a weight off their shoulders, that they don't have to worry about their dog being that distressed and our house getting torn up, or whatever it looks like, for that dog. So before we circle back to some things that people can do now to prevent, are there any myths that you encounter, or either with your clients, or you just see in culture or social media about separation anxiety that you would like to take this opportunity to dispel?
Sure. So, I think a lot of the time people come to me feeling really guilty, and they think that I'm going to tell them something like they're not being alpha enough, or they've spoiled their dog, or I'm going to tell them that they can't be as affectionate to their dog as they have been. And really none of that seems to matter. Other things that people believe, they believe that they caused it because they let their dog sleep in the bed. And of course, as a behavior consultant who sees all sorts of issues, I think a lot of owners are told that sleeping in the bed is the root of all evil. And really, it doesn't cause separation anxiety or any of the other hosts of issues that people imagine that it might.
Yeah. I encounter that sometimes people are like, have this like guilty, like, oh, well, I do. And I'm like, that's a gray area. You make that call. If you want your dog on the couch, fine. That's not going to like cause all these issues. Now, if your dog is like on the couch and crawling all over you and like biting you and being wild and crazy, then yeah, we need to deal with that. But like the actual act of being on the couch is not gonna, you don't have to feel guilty telling me that. Like, I don't want my dogs on the couch. It's just our house rule, but I don't care if you do that. That's fine, So there's just a misunderstanding about what is actually causing the problems that they're having. And, again, I can't try not to be too frustrated or upset with people for just not knowing what they don't know. They're having to sift through and filter through all this information that everyone has an opinion and try to figure out what works best. And so, anyway, back to
and so another thing that I see, which makes me really sad, is, before people see me, a lot of the time they've gotten and have followed some really bad advice. So they've spent a lot of time and money on stuff like CBD oil and, just advice that they got off of Facebook. And like all of these, they've sort of thrown some time and money haphazardly at it. And I feel like when owners do that, it makes them feel like they've been doing something, and it makes them feel like the problem is insoluble because nothing they've tried has worked. But it's just that they've been trying things that we know don't work.
That's a really good perspective. I hadn't thought about that before.
Yeah, so one of my favorite t-shirts that someone gave me it says, "Don't ask Facebook, ask a trainer." But people always ask Facebook first.
I've seen it almost like in some groups I'm in, just community groups, it's almost like Facebook is becoming Google, where they're just going to ask, at this community, and take whatever, the community recommends. And,
Mhm.
you know, I guess we're going to have that problem regardless. But like you say, if people have tried all these things before seeking professional help, and so it can, that's a really good perspective that I hadn't thought about. It can make people feel like hopeless. And so by the time they get around to working with you, they already feel even worse about the problem.
Yeah, and I think one of the saddest cases I've ever had is somebody approached me and wanted to work with me, but decided to actually put their dog to sleep because they had spent thousands of dollars on pet psychics and crystals and essential oils, and they just didn't have any more money or time to spend.
Yeah, that is unfortunate. It does make me sometimes feel like, before you do all these things, wait, let me just tell you, like, here's good things to look for, here's not so great things. If you see this, avoid this. Like, just save yourself that trouble of spending your resources, whether that's money or mental, physical, emotional, whatever, before just spending it on these things that are not going to satisfy and not going to actually help you. Any other myths before we go to another question?
I think that covered it.
Okay. So before we talk about prevention, again, this is a personal, not a question on our list, but just personal curiosity from a trainer's perspective. Is there such a thing as separation distress that's not full-blown separation anxiety? So is there a kind of normative distress at being separated or isolated that is, like I said, normative or normal for the dog, and then does it then at some point kind of swing to the extreme and become kind of this panic disorder, or is that a bunch of hooey?
That's such a good question, and I feel like I could talk about it for hours. That's a really meaty question. So there are different kinds of separation issues. So there are some dogs who really are fine as long as there is another human present. And then there are some dogs who, it doesn't matter if there are 10 people in the house. If their safety person leaves, they're going to have a problem. And then I think, like most behavior issues, there is a spectrum. And, it really depends on the dog, how long-standing it is, and also how dogs express their distress. So I don't think it's super helpful, for me at least, to categorize, this is a mild separation anxiety issue and this is a severe one, because the path is not necessarily more difficult for my dog who's eating drywall versus the dog who just looks sad. And what's really fascinating is about 80% of dogs have some sort of distress when they're left alone, and their owners might never know.
The dog who's eating the drywall, the owner's are going to do something about that. The dog who just looks sad,
they may feel 10 times worse than the drywall eater, but they're not going to get the training and the attention.
That's a really good point. Yeah. I've just been curious about that because, kind of, I guess my perspective has been that dogs are social creatures. They're not really meant to just be, at least our domesticated dogs, I guess.
Right.
It's just not natural for them to be alone. And so, if someone says, hey, my puppy's crying, that's kind of normal. Okay. Right. But I'm not gonna, we need to work on that. Right. But am I gonna panic thinking, oh my goodness, you're gonna have a dog eating the drywall in 6 weeks or whatever? It's like, yeah, I consider that kind of a normal process. If you get a puppy, you bring it home, it's now alone. not with its litter mates, not with its mother.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be a little bit of distress there that is kind of expected and something that needs to be worked through. So rolling into that, what are some things that people can do either, in light of our quarantine, or just standard things that you would tell people, hey, I got this new puppy, or hey, I adopted this rescue dog and I want to prevent the drywall eating or the extremely distressed dog who's just kind of shut down. What are some things they can do to be proactive about preventing that?
So I'll tell you what I'm doing right now. And my partner works from home, so this is something we often do anyway. And if you do usually work from home, definitely listen to this next bit because you should probably be doing it. So all of the dogs in the house. So right now during quarantine, I'm not doing any board and train, but I have a foster dog, and then I have my own dog, Sky, who's only been with us for 6 months. And I'm making sure that most days of the week, they're away for a few hours, because that's going to happen when life goes back to normal, whenever that is. So that may be, creating them. It may be something like me doing what I'm doing right now, relaxing on my back patio with a cup of coffee and no dog. So they just, get a little bit of time to themselves. And of course, if you are quarantined, go ahead and go out. If you have a front yard, if you have a backyard, and get some vitamin D, or if you live in an apartment, just find a sunny spot and just be outside for a little bit. And I'm being creative because it's not like I can just go to a cafe right now and hang out with a friend for a couple of hours. So what I did on Monday, when it was so beautiful out, was I actually loaded up my foster dog in the car, and we went to Lockhart, about 30 minutes away, and just kind of sniffed around downtown for an hour and a half. So that meant that I was gone completely for about 3 hours. And Sky got to kind of chillax by herself. And I've also been just building up the crate as a place that is for good things. So my dog Sky actually isn't crated a lot of the time when we're not home, but just so she has some alone time. She's eating alone in the kennel, and if she has a stuffed Kong, it's alone in the kennel. So I don't use food toys in my real separation anxiety work very often, but if I'm just kind of keeping that muscle conditioned, I may use something really nice, just to associate that alone time even more with good things.
Yeah.
So my dog may not have separation anxiety right now, but I want her to actually love it when I leave.
Exactly. Yeah. She doesn't have a problem now, and you want to keep it that way.
Right. Right.
That you're just really investing in. Let's make sure it stays that way and doesn't get any worse. And I think, in some ways, and I can speak from myself personally, hearing you say, "Okay, I'm outside without my dogs," like just they're going to be alone and separate. I think we get this I call it like crate guilt, where we're like, oh, but I don't, like, I'm home, and so I want my dog to like be out with me, and I feel bad if she's in the crate, and it's so sad, and or I'm driving to the park and I should take my dog with me, and oh, she's home alone, that's so bad, but so to hear you say, like, no, sometimes this needs to happen, and this needs to happen for a good reason. It doesn't have to be every time. It doesn't have to be all the time. We're not saying kennel your dog for 10 hours straight, you know. But for her good, it's okay to just let them be by themselves for a while. And I actually had a client last year that they had gotten a puppy, and mom and dad weren't huge dog people, but they were fairly like, okay, we're gonna do it. Kids want a dog, we'll be committed to it, you know. But mom had said, you know, I'm an introvert, so in the morning, you know, we get up and we do our stuff and take the kids to school, I think she said, and then puppy goes in the crate and I go to my bedroom and I have my time. And I was like, yes, good. Practice that kind of stuff, where just because you've got this puppy doesn't mean they need to be out with you all the time. You need a break, she needs a break. That's good stuff. But it is still hard. I have that crate guilt. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you know, the dog, and I'm home, and the dog should be out. And so it's helpful to hear you say, like, no, it's okay. Just let them practice being alone, because you are trying to prevent a real serious problem from happening later on, right?
Yeah, it feels very, very strange to take a walk without a dog, but you can do it.
You can do it. You can do it. Anything else that people can be doing to prevent, other than just making sure they're intentional about having alone time so it's not such a shock to the dog when things get back to normal?
You know, I think that's really it. Just live your life as though things aren't really weird right now. Just think about the things that you are going to do when life gets back to semi-normalcy, and do them, because we don't want to just, you know, throw our dogs into a completely new routine when that happens.
Yeah, try to keep a little bit of the old, even though things are weird, so that it's not this huge shock. Is there anything else you would like kind of the general public to know about separation anxiety that we haven't already talked about?
Yeah, and this isn't really something that we've touched on, but I really say, if you are experiencing separation anxiety issues with your dog, talk to your vet. So I'm a big believer in medication as a first line of attack rather than a last resort. Yes. So, you know, separation anxiety is a real emotional problem. It really is like a panic attack. And just like we are not in the best frame of mind to learn new things when we're panicking, our dogs aren't either. So medication can make this process a lot less painful and a little bit faster.
Do you find that a lot of vets are on board with that, or you know, there's like this fine line between, we're not vets, but sometimes we see behaviors that we're like, I think this is more than a behavior thing. I can't fix this with behavior approach alone. And so, you know, there's that difficulty of, you know, okay, I'm gonna have a conversation with a client and hope that then when they go talk to their vet, the vet is gonna be knowledgeable enough in behavior to understand what's going to be most helpful here. So do you find that there's a lot of, do you worry about that? You said that some vets refer to you, so I assume you've got some people that you're kind of connected to, but are you usually feel pretty comfortable saying, okay, client, go talk to your vet, and everything works well with that? Do you kind of educate the client?
So it's one of those things, you know, I think I've been doing this for a while, so I've seen sort of a changing of the guard, and I see a lot more vets who are knowledgeable about behavioral medicine, and also we have more and more veterinary behaviorists coming online. So there are veterinary behaviorists in Texas. And there are also veterinary behaviorists who will do consults with your vet if needed.
And I think too, like the fear-free
Mm-hmm.
certification and stuff like that is hopefully becoming more mainstream and well known. And so I think the veterinary world is getting a little bit more, hopefully, exposure to the ideas of behavior and how to help keep stress low and all that stuff. So hopefully, like you said, there is kind of this melding of instead of having two separate worlds, well, these people treat the physical health and these people treat the behavioral health. There's a little bit more overlap and that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's happening a lot more, and you love to see it.
Yes, it is very, very good. Because there's a lot of physical stuff that can impact the behavior that
Oh, absolutely.
we can't. I had a client, very interesting case, late last year, really bad chewing, real bad chewing. And I was actually thinking there might have been some separation stuff because it seemed worse when dad was gone. Mom and kids were just home, but it seemed worse when dad was gone. So I thought, well, maybe he's, really attached to dad. And so when dad's gone, he's distressed and that's making him chew. Well, long story short, it was actually his allergies, physical allergies.
Oh.
They kind of stumbled. We had been working for a couple of weeks. They kind of stumbled on some medical stuff, and he wound up getting some sort of allergy shot from the vet. And then the family reported like he was calmer. His desire to chew went way down. And so, yeah, there's these physical things that can impact behavior that we might be able to be aware of. Oh, well, I've seen this in the past and maybe this is what's going on, but we can't legally start doling out medication and making diagnostics things. And like, we have to rely on the veterinary world to do that.
Yeah.
So it is nice to see that vets becoming more familiar with behavior and veterinary behavior is just a great asset for us here locally as well.
Yes.
Okay, so last question. What is your favorite thing about working separation anxiety cases? You said that you used to be me, that when you saw a separation anxiety case, you got tense and didn't want to have anything to do with it. But now I assume you're not. So what do you love about it?
Oh my gosh, it's one of those things that can be life-changing. More so than most of the things that I work on. It can mean that people are able to go to parties when they have kind of stopped doing that for a while. And it means that their dogs aren't just feeling terrible for hours and hours a day. So it makes people and dogs really happy. And that's kind of what it's all about.
Yes, and I think, like you say, there's definitely, I have found as a trainer, most people are coming to me because they're having a problem of some kind. Of course, you get some puppy people who are like, we're going to be really proactive, and but a lot of the times it's, I've got a problem, so it's disrupting my life, and I need you to help me make this problem go away. But with something like separation anxiety, that can feel so confining, right, for the family, that they just feel trapped, like they can't go anywhere and do anything. And so for them to be able to go out and enjoy themselves, knowing that their dog is not freaking out and having the panic attack and destroying who knows what and all that, is very, you feel like you can live, right? Instead of being under quarantine, basically.
Right.
They feel like they can live again. And I hope people watching this too, if they are struggling with separation anxiety, their dog is, I hope they would be encouraged to hear Kim say that you have success.
Yes.
That there is something that can be done, and you're not sentenced to live with that problem forever and be stuck at home with your dog. That something can be done, and it's doable, and you don't have to send your dog off to the professionals to do it. That she can coach you through what needs to be done to make it better. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else? Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
You know, I would just say, if you are watching this, go take a walk. It's a beautiful day.
Yeah. Yes. Well, thank you so much, Kim. It was lovely getting to talk with you about this. I appreciate you sharing your expertise, as this is kind of needs to be on everybody, dog owners needs to be on their radar, to make sure that they're being proactive about preventing their own dog from developing that. I will include Kim's contact information when I post this. So if you are watching this and have a separation anxiety issue, please reach out to Kim and get some help for both yourself and your dog. Thank you, Kim. You enjoy the rest of your day. You keep soaking up the vitamin D and enjoy your alone time. And hopefully you stay well and your business continues to thrive in the midst of all this.
Okay, it was wonderful to talk to you, Leanne.
Nice. Same to you. Bye-bye.